The massive council chamber stretched out like a great metal ocean. Thousands of seats filled with alien beings from every corner of the galaxy, their voices mixed together in a loud buzz of excitement and smugness. Today was the day they would finally put the humans in their place. Ambassador Jiho Park sat alone in the small human section. His dark suit looked simple next to the bright robes and glittering armor of the other species. He kept his face calm, but his hands were tight on the armrests of his chair. Around him, the alien representatives pointed and whispered. Some even laughed. The council chairman Vexithari stood at the center podium. His blue skin shimmered under the bright lights. His forearms spread wide as he called for quiet. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of the translation devices. Honored council members, Vexithari began, his voice carrying easily through the vast space. Today we vote on Resolution 47 Alpha, the seizure and redistribution of the planet known as Earth. A wave of excited chatter swept through the chamber. Jiho watched as hundreds of alien faces turned toward him. Their eyes glowed with greed and satisfaction. They had been planning this for months. The human species, Vexithari continued, has shown itself incapable of proper planetary stewardship. They fight among themselves. They waste resources. They pollute their own world. The Galactic Council cannot allow such primitive behavior to continue. Jiho stood slowly. The chamber fell quiet as all eyes focused on him. He was much smaller than most of the other ambassadors. His people had only been part of the galactic community for 50 years. They were still considered newcomers and primitives. Honored Chairman, Jiho said, his voice steady, my people request the right to speak before this vote. Vexithari's large eyes narrowed. The human representative will have 30 seconds. 30 seconds. To defend his entire species and their homeworld. Jiho looked around the chamber at the thousands of alien faces. Most looked bored. Others seemed amused. A few appeared genuinely hostile. Members of the council, Jiho began. Earth is our home. Our only home. Yes, we have problems. Yes, we are young compared to your great civilizations. But we are learning. We are growing. We ask for time. A loud laugh came from the hegemony section. Ambassador Korth stood up, his massive frame towering over those around him. Time? He roared. Your species has had thousands of years. You still fight wars over pieces of dirt. You still burn fossil fuels. You cannot even agree on simple things like trade agreements. More laughter echoed through the chamber. Jiho felt his face grow warm but kept his expression neutral. We have made mistakes, Jiho admitted. But we have also made progress. In the 50 years since first contact, we have reduced global conflicts by 60%. We have begun cleaning our oceans. We have started working together as one species instead of separate nations. Too little, too late, called out Ambassador Zenth from the Crystalline Union. Her voice rang like breaking glass. Your world sits at a perfect location for our mining operations. Your water reserves could supply 3 systems. Your agricultural potential could feed billions of our people. And what of our people? Jiho asked. What happens to humanity? Vexithari waved one of his 4 hands dismissively. Relocation camps have been prepared on several worlds. Your people will be well cared for. You will be allowed to maintain your culture in designated areas. The word camp sent a chill through Jiho. He had studied galactic history. He knew what happened to species that got relocated. They disappeared within a few generations. Their cultures died. Their languages were forgotten. We cannot accept this, Jiho said firmly. You have no choice, Vexithari replied. His voice grew cold. The vote will now proceed. The chamber erupted in noise as the voting began. Massive screens showed the tally as it climbed. Yes votes poured in from every section. The hegemony voted yes. The Crystalline Union voted yes. The Aquatic Federation voted yes. One by one, every major power in the galaxy voted to destroy his world. Jiho watched the numbers climb. 400 yes votes, 500, 600. His heart sank as he realized the truth. This was not really a vote. This was a show. The decision had been made long ago in private meetings and secret deals. A few small voices voted no. The peaceful collective voted no. The neutral worlds voted no. The Democratic Alliance voted no. But they were tiny voices in a sea of greed. The final tally, Vexithari announced with obvious pleasure, is 847 votes in favor, 3 votes against. Resolution 47 Alpha passes. The chamber exploded in cheers. Alien delegates hugged each other and celebrated. They began discussing how to divide up Earth's resources even before Jiho could react. The oceans would go to the Aquatic Federation, the mineral rights to the hegemony, the agricultural lands to whoever bid highest. Jiho sat back down heavily. His communicator buzzed with an urgent message from Earth, from Admiral Heejin Lee aboard the defense ship Defiance. He read it quickly and felt a small spark of hope. As the aliens celebrated around him, Jiho allowed himself a tiny smile. They thought they knew everything about humanity. They thought humans were weak and primitive and helpless. They had made one very important mistake. They had never asked what humanity had been doing for the past 50 years of contact with the galaxy. They had never wondered why Earth's small defense fleet stayed so close to home. They had never questioned why human diplomats always seemed so calm under pressure. Jiho stood and walked toward the exit as the celebration continued around him. Near the door, he stopped and turned back to look at the thousands of aliens still cheering their victory. "Admiral Lee," he said quietly into his communicator. "Execute Protocol 7. The response came back immediately. Protocol 7 confirmed. All ships ready. Beginning Phase 1 in 30 minutes. Jiho left the chamber without looking back. Behind him, the aliens continued their celebration. They had voted to seize Earth. They thought they had won the greatest prize in the galaxy. They had no idea what was coming next. In the depths of space around Earth, Admiral Heejin Lee stood on the bridge of the Defiance. Around her, 200 human crew members worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. Through the main screen, she could see the massive alien blockade. 50,000 ships from dozens of species, the greatest military force ever assembled. "All stations report ready," her first officer reported. "Very good," Admiral Lee replied. She looked once more at the enemy fleet. So many ships, so much firepower. The aliens were so confident in their overwhelming numbers. "Begin Phase 1, she ordered. The celebration was about to end. 3 months had passed since the Council vote. Fleet Commander Zorvak stood on the bridge of his flagship as it approached Earth. Behind him stretched the largest invasion fleet in galactic history. 50,000 ships from every major species in the Council. It was enough firepower to crack planets in half. Zorvak felt proud as he looked at his fleet through the main viewing screen. His own species, the hegemony, had contributed 15,000 warships. The Crystalline Union brought their crystal destroyers. The Aquatic Federation sent their bioships. Even the smallest council members had sent everything they could spare. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we are receiving a transmission from Earth." "Put it on screen," Zorvak ordered. The image that appeared showed empty cities. Streets with no people walking on them. Buildings dark and silent. Parks with no children playing. The camera moved slowly through what looked like New York City, but it was completely abandoned. "Where are they?" asked his second-in-command, a young officer named Kelvak. "Hiding, probably," Zorvak replied with a laugh. "Humans are cowards. They ran away when they saw our fleet coming." The transmission continued to show more empty cities. London with no traffic on its streets. Tokyo with no lights in its buildings. Seoul completely deserted. It was as if every human on Earth had simply vanished. "Sir, we are detecting automated systems still running," the scanning officer reported. "Power plants, water treatment, communication networks. Everything is working, but no one is operating them." Zorvak nodded. "They left their machines running, but took themselves somewhere to hide." "It does not matter. We will find them soon enough." His fleet moved into orbit around Earth. The planet looked beautiful from space. Blue oceans covered most of its surface. White clouds swirled in perfect patterns. Green and brown continents showed rich farmland and forests. It was exactly what the Council had wanted. "Begin landing operations," Zorvak commanded. "Secure all major cities and resource centers. Find where the humans are hiding." Thousands of landing craft launched from the fleet. They carried millions of soldiers from dozens of species. The invasion of Earth had begun. The first troops to land found the cities exactly as the transmissions had shown. Empty but undamaged, everything was clean and in perfect working order. Streetlights still functioned. Water still flowed from taps. Even the internet was still running. Colonel Thane of the Hegemony Ground Forces explored the empty streets of Washington, D.C. His soldiers spread out through the government buildings. They found offices with coffee still warm on desks. Computers still logged into user accounts. Meeting rooms with presentation screens still showing half-finished reports. It is like they just disappeared. one of his soldiers said nervously. Maybe they did, another soldier joked. Maybe they have some kind of teleportation technology. Colonel Thane did not find it funny. Something felt wrong about this whole situation. Humans were known for being stubborn and aggressive. They should have fought. Even a losing battle would have been more typical than this complete abandonment. He found a large screen in what appeared to be a government building. When he touched it, a message appeared in perfect hegemony script. How did the humans know his language so well? The message was simple. Thank you for showing us who you really are. What does that mean? Asked his sergeant. Colonel Thane stared at the message. A cold feeling grew in his stomach. I do not know, but I do not like it. Similar messages appeared all over Earth in dozens of languages. Every species that had joined the invasion found messages written perfectly in their own script. The messages were always polite and always the same. Thank you for showing us who you really are. Back in space, Fleet Commander Zorvac was having his own problems. His long-range communications were not working properly. Messages to the Council took much longer to send than they should. Sometimes they did not arrive at all. Sometimes they arrived but were changed in small ways. Sir, we have lost contact with Supply Fleet 7, his communications officer reported. What do you mean lost contact? Zorvac demanded. They were supposed to arrive yesterday with food and fuel supplies. We cannot reach them on any frequency. Zorvac felt worried but tried not to show it. Send out search ships. Find them, but the search ships found nothing. Supply Fleet 7 had simply vanished somewhere between the Council systems and Earth. 300 ships carrying vital supplies had disappeared without sending any distress signal. 2 days later, another supply fleet went missing. Then a reconnaissance group. Then an entire patrol squadron. Sir, his intelligence officer said during the morning briefing, we have a problem. What now? Zorvac asked tiredly. Our scanning drones are malfunctioning. They keep reporting strange energy readings from empty space. When we send ships to investigate, they find nothing. Equipment failures, Zorvac said, but he did not sound convinced. Sir, there is something else. The drones that malfunction always do so in the same pattern. They report energy spikes at exactly 17-second intervals. Every time. Zorvac thought about this. Equipment did not fail in exact patterns. That suggested someone was causing the failures deliberately. But who? The humans had all disappeared. Their defense fleet was nowhere to be found. On Earth, the occupation forces were having their own strange experiences. Soldiers would report seeing lights moving through abandoned buildings at night. When they investigated, they found nothing. Equipment would stop working for exactly 17 seconds, then start again normally. The strangest reports came from the soldiers exploring underground areas. Subway tunnels in major cities seemed to go much deeper than the maps showed. Some tunnels appeared to connect cities that were thousands of kilometers apart. A few soldiers claimed to have walked from New York to Los Angeles through underground passages, but their officers did not believe them. Colonel Thane was examining one of these deep tunnels when he found something that made his blood freeze. Hidden behind a false wall was a massive room filled with computer screens. The screens showed detailed information about every species in the Council. Military capabilities, economic systems, political structures, even personal information about individual leaders. But the most shocking discovery was the dates on the files. Some of the information was over 20 years old. The humans had been studying the galactic community much longer than anyone realized. Sir, his sergeant said nervously, look at this. On one screen was a detailed battle plan. It showed exactly how the Council fleet had approached Earth. It predicted exactly where each species would position their ships. It even included accurate estimates of how many troops each army would bring. The plan was dated 6 months before the Council had even voted to seize Earth. Colonel Thane realized with growing horror that the humans had known this was coming. They had not run away in fear. They had left on purpose. Everything that was happening was part of their plan. He reached for his communicator to contact Fleet Commander Zorvac. But before he could speak, all the screens in the room lit up with the same message. Phase 1 complete. Beginning Phase 2. Around Earth, 50,000 alien ships suddenly lost all contact with each other. Their communications went completely dead. Their scanning equipment stopped working. Their navigation systems began showing impossible readings. In the depths of space, human ships that no one had seen began to move. The trap was closing. The council chamber had never been so chaotic. Emergency alerts flashed on every screen. Ambassadors from dozens of species shouted over each other in panic. Chairman Vexthari stood at his podium trying to restore order, but his forearms waved uselessly as more bad news arrived every minute. Order! Order! Vexthari called out. We must discuss these reports calmly. But there was nothing calm about what the reports contained. All across the galaxy, impossible things were happening. Things that made no sense according to everything the council thought they knew about reality. Ambassador Korth of the Hegemony stood up heavily. His massive frame shook with rage. My homeworld is gone, he roared. Hegemony Prime has disappeared from our system. That is impossible, replied Ambassador Zenth from the Crystalline Union. But her voice sounded uncertain. Planets cannot just disappear. Tell that to my people. Korth shouted back. One day our world was there. The next day it was orbiting a completely different star. A star that is somehow better for agriculture than our old sun. Similar reports came from all over the chamber. The Aquatic Federation had lost 3 colony worlds. The Democratic Alliance found 2 of their planets had somehow moved closer together, making trade much easier between them. The neutral worlds discovered their mining operations had been relocated to asteroid belts with much richer mineral deposits. But the most shocking report came from Ambassador Kelth of the Andraran Empire. One of our dead worlds has become a paradise, Kelth said in a voice full of wonder and fear. Andrara 7 was a barren rock. No atmosphere, no water, no life. Yesterday our scouts found it covered in forests and oceans. The air is perfect for breathing. The soil is rich and fertile. How is this possible? Demanded Vexithari. There are humans living there, Kelth continued. Thousands of them. They have built beautiful cities. Their technology is unlike anything we have ever seen. When our scouts asked how long they had been there, they said 3 weeks. 3 weeks. The same amount of time since the invasion of Earth had begun. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. While the Council's best military forces had been busy conquering an empty Earth, humans had somehow appeared on worlds throughout the galaxy. Not as refugees or prisoners, but as colonists with impossible technology. Sir, Vexthari's aide whispered urgently in his ear. We are receiving a transmission request. From the humans. Vexthari looked around the panicked chamber. Part of him did not want to take the call, but he needed answers. Put them through. The main screen flickered to life. A young human woman appeared. She looked to be in her 20s with short black hair and calm dark eyes. She wore a simple white uniform with no decorations or rank symbols. Behind her was what looked like a garden, but the plants were unlike anything the council had ever seen. Greetings, honored council members, the woman said politely. My name is Deun Seo. I speak for humanity. Where is Ambassador Jiho Park? Vexithari demanded. We will only negotiate with official representatives. Deun smiled pleasantly. Ambassador Park is busy helping with the evacuation of your invasion fleet from Earth, but I am authorized to speak for all humans everywhere. Everywhere? Vexithari's voice cracked slightly. How many worlds do you people occupy? Currently we have active colonies on 473 worlds, Dayun replied as if she were discussing the weather. We established most of them in the past month. We have been quite busy. The number hit the council like a physical blow, 473 worlds. The entire council only controlled about 600 inhabited systems. Humans had somehow claimed almost as much territory as the rest of the galaxy combined. This is impossible, Ambassador Korth sputtered. Your species barely has space travel. You cannot even leave your own solar system without our help. You are correct that we have pretended to be limited in that way. Dayun agreed pleasantly. We found it useful to let you believe we were primitive while we studied your civilizations. Studied us? Vexthari leaned forward. For how long? We have been monitoring galactic communications for about 80 years, Dayun said. We know a great deal about all of your species. Your strengths, your weaknesses, your fears, your desires. We know which of you voted to seize our world and which of you voted against it. The implications of her words spread through the chamber like a cold wind. 80 years. Humans had been watching and learning about galactic civilization since before most council members had even known Earth existed. What do you want? Vexthari asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. We want you to withdraw all of your forces from Earth within 72 hours, Dayun said. Her voice remained pleasant, but her eyes grew cold. We also want a formal apology from this council for your attempt to destroy our civilization." Laughter erupted from parts of the chamber. Several ambassadors seemed to think the human demands were ridiculous. "You are in no position to make demands," Ambassador Zenth called out. "We have 50,000 ships surrounding your world." "You had 50,000 ships," Dayan corrected gently. "Our last count shows only about 37,000 remain operational. The others seem to have experienced various technical difficulties." Vexithari's blood turned cold. "What have you done to our fleets?" "We have done nothing harmful," Dayan assured him. "We simply helped some of your ships relocate to positions where they can be more useful. For example, your supply ships are now distributed throughout systems where your people need them most. Your medical ships have been moved to areas where your colonies require emergency care." She paused, and her pleasant smile grew slightly wider. "Of course, this means your invasion fleet no longer has supplies or medical support, but we thought your colonies needed those resources more than an aggressive military operation did." The council members began to understand the scope of what had happened. Humans had not just moved planets and established colonies. They had surgically dismantled the entire invasion fleet without firing a single shot. Ships had been scattered across the galaxy, not destroyed but simply relocated where they could not threaten anyone. "This is an act of war," Korth roared. "No," Dayon said firmly. "Your vote to seize our world was an act of war. What we are doing is an act of self-defense. We are simply better at it than you expected." "How?" Vexithari asked quietly. "How is any of this possible?" Dayon's expression grew thoughtful. "Your species all developed faster than light travel by discovering how to jump between points in space. You learned to move from here to there quickly, but you never learned to truly understand space itself." She gestured to something off-screen and the view behind her changed. Instead of a garden, the council could see stars moving slowly across a dark sky. But they were moving in patterns that made no sense. "We did not just learn to travel through space," Dayon continued. "We learned to shape it, to fold it, to convince it to be what we need it to be. Moving planets is quite simple when you understand that space is not fixed. It is flexible." The chamber fell completely silent. What she was describing was beyond anything the council had imagined possible. If humans could manipulate space itself, then all of galactic civilization was at their mercy. "We have prepared something special for those species that voted most enthusiastically for our destruction," Dayon said. Her voice remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath the politeness. "I believe you call it Phase 2. "What is Phase 2? Vexithari whispered. Dayon's smile never wavered. "You will find out soon enough. But I will give you a hint. You thought our world was valuable because of its resources. You wanted our water, our minerals, our agricultural potential. We are going to show you what true abundance looks like." The transmission ended, leaving the council in stunned silence. Within minutes, new reports began flooding in. Across the galaxy, impossible things were happening on an even larger scale, and every single one of them had a human signature. The council's smugness had finally died. In its place grew something they had never felt before when dealing with primitive species: terror. Phase 2 began at exactly midnight, Galactic Standard Time. Across the galaxy, every major trade route suddenly stopped working. Ships that had been traveling between systems for thousands of years found themselves arriving at empty space instead of their destinations. Cargo vessels loaded with vital supplies appeared in the wrong solar systems. Passenger ships found themselves orbiting planets they had never heard of. The galactic economy crashed in a single day. Trade Minister Kelvin of the Hegemony stood in his emergency operations center watching the disaster unfold. Red warning lights flashed on every screen. His staff ran between computer stations trying to understand what was happening. "Sir, the Epsilon trade route has been redirected," one of his analysts reported. "Instead of connecting to our mining colonies, it now leads to empty space." "What about the commercial shipping lanes?" Kelvin asked desperately. "Gone, sir. All of them. Every major shipping route in Hegemony space has been changed or disabled." Kelvin felt sick. The Hegemony controlled 17 star systems, but they depended on trade with dozens of other worlds for basic necessities. Without the shipping routes, his people would run out of food within weeks. Similar disasters were happening everywhere. The Crystalline Union watched helplessly as their crystal miners found themselves stranded on dead worlds with no way to ship their products. The Aquatic Federation discovered their water treatment. Ships had been scattered across dry desert planets where they were Useless. But the worst hit were the species that had voted most enthusiastically. For Earth's seizure, the Zephyrian Empire had been the loudest voice, calling for humanity's destruction. Ambassador Zeltak had given speech after speech about how primitive humans deserved to be enslaved. His people had contributed the most ships to the invasion fleet. Now Ambassador Zeltak stood on the bridge of his personal yacht, staring in horror at what had happened to his home system. Zephyria Prime was gone. Not destroyed, but simply absent. Where his homeworld should have been, there was only empty space and a small communication beacon broadcasting a message. "Greetings from your friends among humanity," the message said in perfect Zephyrian. "Your world has been relocated to a better neighborhood. Please enjoy your new sun. It provides 30% more energy for agriculture. Your growing seasons will be much longer now." Zelthak's hands shook as he followed the coordinates given in the message. When his ship arrived at the location, he found his homeworld orbiting a bright yellow star he had never seen before. But the planet looked healthier than it ever had. The oceans were bluer. The forests were greener. Even from space he could see that the crops were growing better than they ever had. On the surface, his people were not suffering. They were celebrating. The new sun had ended the food shortages that had plagued Zephyria for generations. What had been a struggling world was now a paradise. But it was a paradise controlled by humans. "Sir," his pilot said nervously, "we are receiving another transmission. From the surface." The screen showed a human man in simple work clothes standing in what had once been the Zephyrian capital city. But the city looked different now. The buildings were the same, but they were surrounded by gardens and parks that had not been there before. "Hello, Ambassador Zeltak," the human said pleasantly. "My name is Young Hoan. I am a scientist. I hope you like what we have done with your world." "You kidnapped my entire planet," Zeltak shouted. "We relocated it," Young Ho corrected gently, "and we improved it significantly. Your people are much happier now. Would you like to speak with your government leaders?" The screen split to show Chancellor Vrex, the elected leader of Zephyria. But instead of looking angry or frightened, Vrex appeared calm and even grateful. "Ambassador Zeltak," Vrex said, "you must see what they have accomplished. In just 2 days they have solved problems that we have struggled with for centuries. Our water is cleaner. Our soil is more fertile. Our energy systems are more efficient. They moved our entire world without asking us." Zeltak protested. "Yes," Vrex agreed, "and it was the best thing that ever happened to us. I am formally requesting that you apologize to the humans and ask them to help us join their alliance." Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. Worlds that had supported the invasion of Earth were finding themselves relocated to better positions. Their resources became more abundant. Their technology improved. Their people became healthier and happier, but they were no longer independent. Every relocated world now had human advisors who had made the improvements possible. Every improved system now depended on human technology to function. The council species were discovering what true dependence felt like. Dr. Young Ho An appeared on screens throughout the galaxy that day. Always calm and always helpful, he explained to confused populations how their worlds had been moved. He demonstrated technologies that seemed like magic to most galactic civilizations. "Space is not solid," he told a gathering of Crystalline Union scientists. "It is more like water. It can be shaped and guided if you understand the proper techniques. Moving your world from one star system to another is no more difficult than moving a boat from one dock to another." The scientists stared at him in amazement. Their entire understanding of physics had been proven wrong in a single conversation. "How long have your people possessed this knowledge?" one of them asked. "About 150 years, Dr. An replied casually. "We developed it shortly after we achieved faster-than-light travel. We have been improving the technique ever since." 150 years. Humans had possessed godlike power over space itself, for longer than most of the council species had even known about Earth. "Why did you pretend to be primitive?" another scientist asked. Dr. An smiled sadly. "We wanted to see what kind of people you were when you thought you were stronger than us. We hoped you would be kind and generous. We hoped you would want to help a younger species develop." His expression grew colder. "Instead, you voted to enslave us and steal our world. You showed us exactly who you really are." The implications hit the galactic community like a tsunami. Humans had been testing them all along. The entire Galactic Council had failed a moral exam they had not even known they were taking. But the revelations were not finished. The worst discoveries came when Council investigators began examining their own communication systems. They found that humans had been listening to every private conversation, reading every classified document, monitoring every secret meeting for decades. Humans knew about every corrupt deal, every war crime, every species that had been quietly exterminated, every primitive world that had been strip-mined and abandoned. Every lie the Council had told about their noble mission to spread civilization. The files were massive. Detailed records of 80 years of Council crimes, all documented with perfect accuracy. And now every species in the galaxy had access to them. The moral authority of the Galactic Council collapsed. Overnight, riots broke out on dozens of worlds as populations learned what their leaders had really been doing. Colonial worlds declared independence. Member species withdrew from Council treaties. The carefully constructed galactic government fell apart as the truth spread, and through it all, human ships appeared wherever there was suffering. They brought food to hungry worlds. They brought medicine to sick populations. They brought technology to struggling colonies. They did everything the Council had claimed to do, but they did it without asking for anything in return. By the end of the week, half the galaxy was asking the same question. If humans were this powerful and this generous, why had they ever allowed the Council to exist at all? The answer to that question would change everything. The Emergency Council session was the largest gathering in galactic history. Representatives from over 1,000 species filled the Great Chamber. Many had never been invited to Council meetings before. They were the small voices, the primitive worlds, the species that had been ignored or exploited by the major powers. But today, they all had equal seats. Chairman Vexithari looked older than his 400 years as he called the session to order. His blue skin had lost its shimmer. His forearms trembled as he raised them for silence. Around him, the once proud ambassadors of the great powers sat like defeated prisoners. "We are here," Vexithari began, his voice barely audible, "to hear humanity's final terms." The chamber fell silent as the main screen activated. This time it was not Dionseo who appeared, but a middle-aged human woman with graying hair and kind eyes. She wore a simple blue dress and sat at what looked like an ordinary wooden desk. "Greetings," the woman said warmly. "My name is Sunhee Jang. I serve as humanity's ambassador for transitional affairs." "Transitional affairs?" Vexithari asked nervously. "The transition from the current galactic order to something better," Sunhee explained. "We understand that this is a difficult time for all of you. Change always is." Ambassador Korth of the Hegemony stood up heavily. His massive frame looked smaller somehow, as if recent events had crushed his spirit. "What do you want from us?" he asked quietly. "We want you to choose," Sunhee replied simply. "Choose what?" Sunhee's expression grew serious. "You can choose to continue as you have been. You can rebuild your council, restart your exploitation of weaker species, and return to the old ways of doing things. We will not stop you." A murmur of hope ran through some parts of the chamber. Perhaps the humans would allow them to go back to their old lives after all. "However," Sunhee continued, "you should understand that we will no longer pretend to be primitive. We will no longer hide our capabilities. Any species that chooses to harm others will find us standing in their way." The hope died quickly. Everyone understood what she meant. The old system had only worked because humans had pretended to be weak. Now that their true power was known, any attempt to return to the brutal old ways would meet unstoppable resistance. "What is the alternative?" asked Ambassador Zenth from the Crystalline Union. "Partnership," Sunhee said. "We are offering to share our knowledge and technology with any species that commits to peaceful coexistence. We can help you solve problems of hunger, disease, resource scarcity, and environmental damage. We can teach you to shape space as we do. We can help you build a truly prosperous galactic civilization." "At what cost?" Vexithari asked suspiciously. "The cost is simple," Sunhee replied. "No more slavery. No more genocide. No more exploitation of primitive worlds. No more wars of conquest. Any species that wants our help must commit to treating others with respect." The chamber erupted in arguments. Some species thought the terms were reasonable. Others felt they were being asked to give up their fundamental right to expand and conquer. "You are asking us to change everything about how we live," shouted Ambassador Thurek of the warrior clans. "Yes," Sunhee agreed calmly. "We are, because how you have been living is wrong." "Says who?" Thurek demanded. Who gave you the right to judge us? Sun He's kind expression hardened. You did. When you voted to enslave our people and steal our world, when you decided that might makes right, you established that the strong have the authority to impose their will on the weak. She paused, letting the implications sink in. We are simply stronger than you thought. A new voice spoke from the back of the chamber. An elderly being from a species most of the council members did not recognize stood up slowly. I am Elder Korith of the Peaceful Collective, the being said in a soft voice. My people have been asking these questions for a long time. Why do the strong always prey upon the weak? Why do advanced civilizations think they have the right to destroy primitive ones? Why is the galaxy so full of suffering when we have the technology to create abundance? Elder Korith looked around the chamber with ancient, sad eyes. Now we know the answer. It was not because cruelty was necessary. It was because no one was strong enough to stop it. Until now. The chamber fell silent as the weight of his words settled over everyone. My people vote to accept humanity's terms, Elder Korith continued. We have seen what they can accomplish. In 3 days, they solved resource problems that have plagued our world for generations. They asked for nothing in return except that we treat our neighbors with kindness. Other small voices began to speak up. The Democratic Alliance voted to join the Human Partnership. The neutral worlds agreed to the terms. The Agricultural Cooperative enthusiastically supported the new system, but the major powers remained silent, struggling with what accepting would mean. Ambassador Zelthak of the Zephyrian Empire finally spoke. Our homeworld has never been more prosperous. Our people have never been happier. The humans have given us gifts beyond imagination. His voice broke slightly, but they have also made us completely dependent on their technology. If we displease them, they could move our world to an empty system and leave us to die. That is true, Sun He acknowledged. We could do that. Just as you could have done far worse to us if your invasion had succeeded. The difference is that we do not govern through fear. How do we know that? Zeltak challenged. Because we have already had the power to destroy you all for over a century, Sun He replied matter-of-factly. If we wanted to rule through intimidation, we would have done so long ago. She gestured and new images appeared on the screen behind her. They showed human colonies on distant worlds, but the dates displayed made the council members gasp. Some of the settlements were over 100 years old. We have been living quietly throughout the galaxy for generations, Sun He explained. We could have revealed ourselves at any time. We could have conquered your worlds, enslaved your peoples, or simply eliminated you as competitors. The images showed human cities that were clearly more advanced than anything the council had built. But they also showed humans working alongside alien species in perfect harmony. Instead, we chose to watch and hope that you would become better on your own. We wanted to believe that intelligence naturally led to wisdom and compassion. We wanted you to prove that advanced civilizations could be kind. Her expression grew sad. You proved the opposite. You showed us that power without morality leads only to suffering. That is why we can no longer remain hidden. A long silence followed. Finally, Chairman Vexuthari spoke. If we accept your terms, what happens to our independence? What happens to our sovereignty? You keep both, Sun He assured him. We have no interest in ruling you. We simply want to create a galaxy where no species needs to fear destruction by its neighbors, where primitive worlds can develop naturally without being exploited, where abundance is shared rather than hoarded. And if we refuse? Sun He's expression remained kind, but her words carried the weight of absolute certainty. Then you will face the consequences of your choices alone. We will not help species that refuse to help others. We will not share our abundance with those who create scarcity. We will not protect people who prey upon the innocent. She leaned forward slightly. The galaxy is about to become a very different place. You can be part of building something better, or you can be left behind by it, but you cannot stop it from happening. The choice was no choice at all. Every species in the chamber could see the writing on the wall. Humanity's technology was so far beyond anything they possessed that resistance was impossible. Their only options were cooperation or irrelevance. One by one, the voices began to change. The hegemony agreed to the terms. The Crystalline Union accepted the partnership. Even the warrior clans grudgingly voted to join the new order. By the end of the day, only 3 species had refused humanity's offer. Within a week, as they watched their neighbors prosper under human guidance while they struggled with failing trade routes and broken supply lines, even they reconsidered. The Galactic Council voted to dissolve itself. In its place, they established the Galactic Cooperative, with humans serving as mediators rather than rulers. The age of conquest was ending. The age of cooperation had begun. 2 years had passed since the Council's dissolution. The galaxy was a different place now, barely recognizable from the brutal system that had existed before. Fleet Admiral Seojin Park stood on the observation deck of New Geneva Station, watching the impossible sight outside. Her mobile command center existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, allowing her to monitor every part of the galaxy at once. Through the crystalline walls, she could see stars that were actually in different solar systems, all brought together through humanity's mastery of space itself. "Admiral," her aide said softly, "the weekly progress reports are ready." Seojin nodded and accepted the data tablet. The numbers still amazed her, even after 2 years of steady improvement. Galactic hunger had decreased by 94%. Interspecies conflicts were down to almost zero. Resource scarcity, once the driving force behind most wars, had become practically extinct. Most remarkably, over 300 species that had been considered primitive by the Old Council were now thriving members of the Galactic Cooperative. "Any problems to address?" Seojin asked. "Only minor disputes, Admiral. The Hegemony and the Crystalline Union are arguing about mining rights in the Vega system. The Agricultural Cooperative wants permission to terraform 3 more dead worlds." "Approved for the terraforming," Seojin decided. "As for the mining dispute, remind both sides that there are plenty of asteroids for everyone now. They do not need to fight over scraps anymore." It was a common problem in the new galaxy. Species that had spent millennia competing for limited resources struggled to adjust to a universe of abundance. Old habits died hard. Through the station's multidimensional windows, Seojin could see one of the cooperative's newest projects. The Andraran system, once home to a dying species on a depleted world, now hosted 7 thriving planets. Humans had moved 5 dead worlds from distant systems and transformed them into gardens perfectly suited for Andraran life. The Androrans themselves had been initially suspicious of human help. Their species had survived 3 attempts at genocide by Council forces. They found it hard to believe that any advanced species could be truly altruistic. But Captain Taehyun Kim had spent 6 months living among them, teaching their engineers and learning their culture. Now they were some of humanity's strongest supporters in the cooperative. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we have a priority message from Earth. Put it through." The screen showed Ambassador Jiho Park, now serving as humanity's first galactic coordinator. He looked tired but satisfied as he sat in his office overlooking the rebuilt city of Seoul. Through his windows, Seojin could see representatives from dozens of species walking together through peaceful streets. "Hello, sister," Jiho said warmly. "How are things in your corner of the universe?" "Quiet," Seojin replied with a smile. "The Zephyrians are requesting help with weather control on their new colony worlds. The Peaceful Collective wants to establish 3 more research stations. The usual peaceful problems. Any resistance to the new order? Less every day. The benefits are too obvious to ignore. Even the species that fought the changes hardest are starting to see the advantages." It was true. The transformation had been remarkably smooth. Once species realized that cooperation brought rewards beyond their wildest dreams. The warrior clans, once the most aggressive faction in the Old Council, now served as peacekeepers for the cooperative. Their martial skills were valued, but channeled toward protection rather than conquest. "There is something I wanted to discuss with you," Jiho said, his expression growing more serious. "We are receiving applications from species outside our galaxy. Word of the cooperative has spread further than we expected." Seojin raised an eyebrow. "How much further?" "The Andromeda Galaxy has sent ambassadors, so have the Magellanic Clouds. They want to know if we can help them establish similar cooperative systems in their regions." The scope of the request was staggering. Humanity had transformed one galaxy in 2 years. Now they were being asked to reshape the entire local galactic cluster. "Do we have the capacity for such an expansion?" Seojin asked. "We have the technology," Jiho replied. "The question is whether we want to take on that level of responsibility. Helping our own galaxy transition was one thing. Becoming the arbitrators for multiple galaxies is something else entirely." Seojin thought about this. In just a few years, humanity had gone from being considered primitives to becoming the de facto guardians of galactic civilization. It was not a role they had sought, but one that had been thrust upon them by the failures of others. What do you recommend? We help, Jiho said firmly. Not because we want to rule, but because no one else seems capable of creating lasting peace. If we can prevent other galaxies from repeating the mistakes of our council, we should. It was a very human response, Seojin thought, taking on enormous burdens not for personal gain, but because it was the right thing to do. I agree, she said, but we will need more administrators, and we should probably start training other species to take over some of our responsibilities. Already working on it. The Peaceful Collective has produced some excellent mediators. Several former council species have shown real aptitude for resource management. Within a few decades, we might be able to step back to an advisory role. After the call ended, Seojin returned to watching the stars. In one of the viewing panels, she could see a familiar sight. A massive space station that had once been the council's primary military base was now a school. Young beings from hundreds of species studied together, learning not just science and technology, but philosophy and ethics. They were preparing for a future where intelligence and power would be coupled with wisdom and compassion. Her thoughts were interrupted by another aide. Admiral, there is someone here to see you. He says it is important. The visitor was former Chairman Vexithari. The once proud leader of the Galactic Council looked remarkably different. His blue skin had regained some of its shimmer, and his forearms no longer trembled with age. Human medical technology had restored decades of his life, but more importantly, his eyes held something they had never shown during his time as chairman. Humility. Admiral Park, Vexithari said formally. Thank you for seeing me. Please sit, Seojin said kindly. What brings you to New Geneva? Vexithari settled into the chair designed for his species. For a moment he simply stared out at the impossible vista of stars from different galaxies. I wanted to apologize, he said finally. Not just for the vote to seize Earth, but for everything. For the entire system we created. For the centuries of suffering we caused. You were not solely responsible, Seojin replied diplomatically. Perhaps not solely, but I was the leader. The Council's crimes were committed in my name. Vexithari's voice grew heavy with regret. We convinced ourselves that might made right. That advanced civilizations had the natural authority to dominate primitive ones. We never questioned whether we deserved the power we claimed. He looked directly at Seojin. Your species showed us what true advancement means. It is not about technology or military strength. It is about choosing to lift others up instead of tearing them down. We made that choice because we had the luxury of observing others make different ones, Seojin said. We learned from your mistakes. Perhaps that is the real difference between us. Vexithari nodded slowly. I spend my days now working with refugee populations, helping species that were displaced by council policies. It is small atonement for great crimes, but it is what I can offer. After he left, Seojin remained on the observation deck as New Geneva Station slowly rotated through its dimensional phases. In a few hours, she would be able to see Earth directly, despite being hundreds of light years away. She thought about the conversation with Vexithari. The old chairman was not alone in his transformation. Across the galaxy, former council members were dedicating their lives to repairing the damage they had once caused. Some worked in refugee camps, others taught at the new cooperative schools. A few had become explorers, searching for lost civilizations that could benefit from cooperative membership. It was, Seojin reflected, exactly what humanity had hoped would happen. Not punishment for past wrongs, but genuine change toward something better. Her communicator chimed with another message. This one was from Earth's surface, from a small apartment in the city where the story had begun. Hello, Admiral, Ambassador Jiho Park said from his personal office. I thought you should know. We received final confirmation today. Every species that participated in the invasion of Earth has formally requested permanent membership in the cooperative. Even the most reluctant ones, even them. The benefits are simply too substantial to refuse. More importantly, most of their populations genuinely support the new system. They have seen what cooperation can accomplish. Seojin smiled. It had taken 2 years, but the galaxy had finally learned the lesson humanity had tried to teach through their patience and restraint. Power without compassion led to tyranny. But power coupled with wisdom could create miracles. There is something else, Jiho continued. The history archives are complete. Every species in the galaxy now has access to the full record of what happened, how the old system worked, why it failed, and how we built something better.